once again to the Irish NFL show, brought to you in association with our partners at Cassidy Travel. I'm Mark Cockrell, joined as always by Colin Cronin, Brian O'Leary. Good evening, lads.
Evening, Mark.
We decided to give Michael McQuaid the night off because London's coming. It's going to be a big time ahead, so he's having a rest there, not feeling the May West. So best wishes to Michael there. But looking forward to talking through all of the rest of the Sunday's games with you. Please feel free, guys, to put in your comments, your questions into us at Twitter and YouTube. Look forward to hearing from them. And Colin, before we get started on the weekend, though, how about the midweek? We had previewed the Thursday night game. Maybe a quick thought from you and Brian on the result in that AFC North battle.
I think exactly as we expected. Really, the Steelers are a QB short, and it's going to take everything within magical Mike Tomlin's abilities for them to remain, above 500 this year. They have phenomenal weapons, certainly, and we saw the catch from Pickens, but Mitchell Trubisky is not the answer. He said afterwards, definitively, that they're not looking to make a change. But I think they have to do something because if they continue to run Trubisky out there, it's going to be very difficult to continue to get players to buy in.
Echo Column's thoughts. For the first half, Steelers were in the game. Trubisky was in the game. He ran in a touchdown. But as the game, wore on, the Browns defensively started to get the speed with them in terms of what they were doing, and they shut them down essentially for the entirety of the second half. And the game, I felt the second half, the game was closer than it was. I thought the Browns were comfortable in the end, and the weather wasn't the greatest either for kickers on the night. It was a bit adverse. There was a missed extra point, and missed field goals. So the Browns, I always said to Colin, the Browns will be ruined themselves. They really should be 3-0 after last week's meltdown in the last 2 minutes. But it was always going to be a difficult game on a Thursday night with the weather, as it was expected. So they'll be happy to got over the line. And for the Steelers, today has been the talk of the catch more so than the performance. But the performance has to be looked at because, okay, they've got the Jets coming in, but there's difficult days ahead unless they make a change of quarterback, in my opinion.
Well, we'll wait and see if they make a change. The Browns are indeed, though, at least still 2-1, which a lot of teams in the league would love to get to this week. It's going to be needed in that competitive AFC North, to say the least, with the Ravens going well, and the Bengals still not yet firing. I mentioned them at the start, but don't forget to check out our partners, Cassidy Travel, for all their great US NFL packages, and you'll find various giveaways from us all through the year on YouTube and Twitter. So if you're not following us already, please do so if you're just listening to the podcast at the moment. Now, we did break down 3 of the games this weekend on our Thursday night show. You'll find them there on Twitter, on YouTube, on all the channels, but of course through the podcast as well. So if you're a fan of the Saints and Panthers, Texans at the Bears, or the Chiefs at the Colts, we won't be talking about them tonight. They're already out there for your delectations and pleasure already. But, gentlemen, let's get on to talking about football. We've a lot to cover. We've 11 games to talk about. And let's start with the pick of the bunch. An AFC East thundering game of all proportions, possibly the game of the week. And Colin, it doesn't for once involve those beloved New England Patriots.
No, it doesn't. It involves the new kings, I think, of the AFC East in terms of the Buffalo Bills. It would be difficult to make an argument that Josh Allen isn't playing the best. Not to say he's the best player, because that's certainly open for debate. But through the first 2 games of the season, he has been otherworldly. His ability to just make magic happen, his ability to take what teams have thrown at him, the way in which teams have, I suppose, tried to contain Josh Allen. They tried last year. We're seeing it roll out across the league now against other QBs, but he's had to put up with it for a lot longer. He's learned how to play against it. He takes what's there, and if you give him any opportunity to throw downfield, he is going to do that. So an amazing stat from PFF today, which said on 15 plus yard throws, Josh Allen has 1 incompletion and he has 3 touchdowns. So more touchdowns than incompletions, which tells you just how well he is playing. But they are going against a Dolphins side who are electric and have incredible wide receivers. Now, the Bills have one in Stephon Diggs, who has 270 yards. But Tyreek Hill has 284 and Waddle has 240. That's the 1, 2, 3 of receivers in the league currently. Going to see him in this game. The issue for me for the Bills is the injury list. I mean, it resembles a field hospital. So they're without Micah Hyde, Dane Jackson, Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips. Jordan Poyer is questionable, and from what I'm reading, he is unlikely to play. I think that's a huge loss. And for that reason, I have the Miami Dolphins shocking the Buffalo Bills. The Bills will be fine. They will be fine. But just this week, I think that they have a few too many injuries out. And I am going to say that the Dolphins get the win.
Columns starting on the fish. Brian, what's your thoughts? Any beef from you, maybe?
Or tuna, potentially. But he actually hasn't mentioned another one. Gabe Davis, again, he's questionable as well. He didn't play Monday. One of their star players. We saw his breakout game. To a certain extent, week 1, we saw what he did in the playoffs against the Chiefs. Colin is right. This Miami offense has been explosive. And it's magic how stats after 2 weeks are deceiving. They're the number 1 offense in the league, at the moment. But if you base it, if you remove last week's 4-quarter performance, they're like 22nd in the league based on that one game against the Patriots. So it's a little bit distorted in terms of if you look at it, if you go into the granularity of stats in the league. The Dolphins' defense actually concerns me. There was a lot of feeling that they were going to be consistent because they didn't make any radical changes with the coaches and stuff. But we saw last week when the Ravens had 6 big plays in the game and 3 of them went for touchdowns, so they can be exploited as well. And I imagine the Bills will find ways to exploit them. I can see why the Dolphins are being picked by many person, but I do think Josh Allen's on a roll. He's had a great career against Miami. 7-1 against Miami, 247 yards on average, and he runs for an average of 58 yards per game. He just seems to have the knack of finding big performances. Once he's doing it consistently, those games against Miami in particular always seem to go well for him. I can't go against the Bills. I would like to pick the Dolphins. I'd like to see the Dolphins win, but the Bills just right now feel like a juggernaut that no one can get over. It'll be a great game. I'd imagine it'll be high scoring, but for me, I think the Bills will edge it.
Brian, you say the Bills are like a juggernaut. At the moment, they are on a NFL record streak. Their last 20 wins, which has 3 against Miami in that streak, have all come by more than 10 points. I think you have to go back to 2020 for when they last won a game by less than 10 points. So when they win big. Is that a problem? Can they win the close ones? We were talking a little bit about that in the playoffs last year, and of course, they came up short. But the way they've started this season, expectations are quite rightly sky high. They are managing some injuries. They could be starting 2 rookie cornerbacks, their first-round pick, Kai Alem, and Benford as well, who has started some games for them already, a 6th-round pick out of the draft this year. And that could be going up against this very, very threatening and exciting Miami offense. What offense are we going to get from Miami, though? Is it the offense that spluttered for the 3 quarters against the Ravens, or is it the offense that absolutely exploded in the 4th quarter? For my money, I'd like to see a little bit more consistency in relation to it. Even with their injuries, the Bills' defense is a serious unit. Number 1 defense, obviously, in the NFL last year. And overall, as Brian, you described it, I get Colum's point. I get the argument about the upset. But the Bills are a juggernaut, and until proven otherwise, the juggernaut won't be stopped this weekend. So I've gone for the Bills. So we're at 2-1, and Michael too, with his favourite second team, of course, the Buffalo Bills, has gone for the Bills as well. So Colin, you're the lone wolf on this one, but of course we'll see how it all pans out when the games are played. Now, moving from a rivalry in the AFC East, let's go over to the NFC North. And here's a historic rivalry, and probably 2 teams, one of which is flattered to deceive at many, many occasions, and one of which is just flattering a little bit more this year than we might have imagined, both on Hard Knocks and on the actual football field. Colin, Lions and Vikings, break it down for us.
Yeah, these are two teams. I think the last 3 games have been decided by 2 points. So it tells you that this is a division where the teams keep it pretty close. Certainly, we've seen the Vikings last year. We talked about it frequently, how they seem to play to their opponents. And the Lions, though, got the wins last year with kind of, I think, a last-second field goal, and then obviously the catch from Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has been absolutely lights out thus far this year. This, to me, one of the things I'm going to watch out for in this game is Dalvin Cook, because Dalvin Cook had a disaster against the Eagles and he hasn't really gotten going as yet. You never know when a running back is going to, kind of fall off a cliff. That's not to say he has as yet, but I think this is going to be an interesting test to see. He is usually incredible against the Lions. He averages over 100 yards against them. So this is a big test for him. But they're going against a Lions team who, kind of were strong against the Eagles, even though I never felt that game was as close as the scoreline would suggest. But at the same time, the Lions were very good on offense. They're second only to the Chiefs in terms of points. They're fourth in red zone scoring, and they're third in rushing yards per game. I think that the Vikes, after that enormously impressive win over the Packers in week 1, are still finding their feet a little bit. And I'm going to go and say that the momentum is with the Lions here. And would I be shocked if the Vikings won? Absolutely not. They could. But my pick for this is going to be the Lions.
Colin has gone against the trend this week already in 2 games. This game for me is a strange one because Goff has been quite good so far, let's be fair to him. He gets a lot of critics, but 41 of 71 completions, 471 yards, 6 touchdowns. But they've all come at home in 2 games. And defensively, yeah, they won last week, but they let Washington back into the game. They might have taken the foot off the gas, certainly, but they've given up 38 points in the first game and they've given up 27 points last week. There's still concerns in the secondary. We saw when Dotson got into the game last week, Curtis Samuel, they were very efficient. There was big long plays by Wentz, and maybe they were airing it out because they were playing from behind. They want to get back into the game, but we saw the first week the Eagles did something similar as well. The AJ Brown had a big game for 155 yards. I look at offensively what the Vikings have. Thielen, Jefferson, Cook has to get off the slide at some stage and have a really strong game. And Cousins seems to be more comfortable in the home games. And you would expect the Vikings defense to be looking to rebound off a poor game. Having played so well and so strong in the first game, only giving up 7 points at home to the Packers to give up 24 points. They did hold the Eagles in the fourth quarter, didn't give up any points. Maybe that's a little bit of a thing they can work on. But for me, the Lions are going the right direction, but I think this is a game that the Vikings will win.
Colin rightly brings up the results last year, and of course the Lions defeating the Vikings last year probably sealed the fate of Mike Zimmer. It was arguably the most inexcusable loss of his entire regime, and given there were a few bad losses in there, that is saying something. So the Lions put the final nail in his coffin. At the same time, with St. Brown catching that touchdown, we started to see the birth of a real superstar because he finished last year on a roll and he hasn't stopped this year. Probably one of the most exciting players this season so far, albeit only through a couple of weeks. St. Brown and the Lions, they've been watchable. They've been entertaining. I was saying it. They were entertaining on Hard Knocks. They've been very entertaining on the field. Jared Goff, Brian, last week he was in that category of those quarterbacks that we should apologize to for various slanders and events. 4 touchdowns, a very strong performance. And it doesn't get much worse than it did for the Minnesota Vikings last week. Dalvin Cook only had 17 rushing yards. They were thoroughly outplayed by an Eagles team. And it was almost like they were outplayed in spirit and effort just as much as they were in talent. So if nothing else, it reminds you of one of the 5 great rules of gambling on the NFL. Number 1 is never bet on the Dallas Cowboys. Number 2 is see rule number 1. Number 3 is never bet on the Minnesota Vikings. And number 4 is see rule number 3. And of course, number 5 is read again 1 and 3, and especially 3, because you should never, ever, ever bet on the Minnesota Vikings. With that all being said, I still think Jared Goff is going to turn back into a pumpkin, a very entertaining pumpkin, and the Minnesota Vikings can't be as bad as they were last week. I am not going to put money on it. I'm not going to put money near it. I'm not even going to think of gambling involving the Minnesota Vikings ever again in my entire existence. But I will believe that they will win this game. See, I didn't say I'll bet on them winning this game. I believe they will win this game. So, in my heart of hearts, though, Colin and Brian, I actually probably think I'd prefer the Lions to win. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. In relation to it. Michael also goes with the Vikings. So Colin is, I almost want you to howl at this point, Colin. That's 2 lone wolf picks in a row. So good start to the show. Now we're going to do one more game before we end this particular segment of the podcast. And that game brings us back to the AFC. The Baltimore Ravens at the New England Patriots. Colin, AFC championship games, playoff contenders year after year. The luster might have, lost its sparkle on this game a little bit, especially from a Patriots side.
Yeah, two of the more long tenured head coaches, obviously, as well, and 2 guys with a lot of tactical acumen, you would have to say. So I imagine we'll see an interesting and intriguing battle between Belichick and Harbaugh. For me, Mark, the Patriots just haven't been the same since they actually beat the Bills in early December last year in that kind of crazy win game where they only had Mac Jones attempt 3 passes. They won that night, but outside of that resounding victory against the Jags, they put a 50 burger on them, which was quite something. But in the meaningful games, they haven't looked like the Patriots of old. I go back to he came up with a big catch last week, but I just don't believe the receiving talent and the tight end talent is the same as it once was on that Patriots team. I think is Mac Jones an elite QB? No. We've had this discussion, but is Mac Jones a capable QB? Yeah, I think if you put the weapons around him, and I think that's what we're seeing teams look to do, is in order to develop young QBs, you lean into their particular strengths and you give them weapons. I question whether Bill Belichick has done enough for Mac Jones in that respect, and I think ultimately that's what's going to cost them in this game. The Ravens have struggled to get their run game going. There's talk that J.K. Dobbins might be back this week. I don't know if that has yet been confirmed. But Lamar played fantastic last week. They were only undone because the Dolphins have such an array of weapons and speed. I don't believe the Patriots have that. And so for me, it's going to be the Ravens.
There's a feel of doom and gloom about the Patriots, albeit it's only 2 games into the season. Even though they won last week, there's still a lot of negative stuff out there. But defensively, they've been very strong. They've only given up 2 touchdowns, and they've had to only give up 2 touchdowns because they've only scored 24 points in those 2 games. But the first game was against the Dolphins, who went and put all those points up last week. So there is a lot of things to work on here. And I know Mac Jones isn't getting the love, and I know people are kind of concerned about whether he's the right answer in the long run. They had to have some reasonably good long drives, and he's been quite... Is a conservative the right word? It's similar to what we saw last season. Few explosive plays, but again, it's a lot of it is try to keep your offense off the field and have these long drives. I find it difficult to see how they can live with this Ravens offense. And for Ravens defense, that'll be reeling after last week's 40 points. The last 4 times in which they play games haven't given up 40. They've only averaged 19 points in terms of what they've given up. I'm with the Ravens on this. The Ravens have never won a regular season game in Foxborough. They've won in the playoffs 6 games, and they've never won in Foxborough. I think they'll correct that this weekend, and they'll have their first regular season win there. I think the Patriots will play them tough for large parts of the game. Just feel that they will find ways with Bateman and Mark Andrews to have too much for the Patriots in the overall scheme of the game.
So, gents, the Patriots are 17-3 in home openers. And bear in mind, they've played 2 away games. So, this is their home opener for this season. And that's an interesting statistic. Also of interest might be that Mac Jones started breaking out a few RPOs during the Steelers game last week. However, the Baltimore Ravens, and when you've got Lamar Jackson maybe running some RPOs or option plays, are far more dynamic, far more explosive, and far more exhilarating team, to be frank. Last week, they became the first team in NFL history to have touchdowns of more than 75 yards on a pass, a run, and a special teams play. And in many respects, Brian, you alluded to it on our Thursday show. That was part of their flaw, maybe, that there was no time off the clock, and hence why we had such a high scoring game with an opportunity for Miami to come back in. But like you, I think that defensive breakdown was an aberration against an equally explosive and dangerous Miami Dolphins offense. You cannot say, you really can't say, that the Patriots are in any way a similar threat offensively. And certainly the Baltimore Ravens will give any team more than enough to contend with when it comes to their offense. Bill Belichick said about Lamar Jackson this week, he has answered any questions about his ability to play in the pocket. You could say this is Belichick softening up the opposition, as he often does, but Jackson has thrown for 3 passing touchdowns in each of the opening 2 games. The Ravens, the first time he's done that in his career. And there are a lot of media outlets talking about the fact that in 2018, the Pats had Jackson in for a visit, but decided with their 2 first-round picks to go for Isaiah Wynn and Sony Michel and not draft Jackson potentially as Tom Brady's successor. I think that's a bit stretching, to be honest with you. I don't think the Patriots were thinking necessarily succession at that particular point in time. But Lamar Jackson said he's seen Bill Belichick smile, and he had great times on that particular visit. I don't think it's going to be Belichick smiling this weekend. I think it's going to be Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh, who's given Belichick a lot of problems as an opposing coach. So I go with the Ravens, and Michael also makes it a full sweep. So a 4 on the Ravens this week. Now, that brings us to the end of our first segment for the podcast. So we'll move on now and look at the next 4 games very shortly. Okay, moving on with the show. Just a reminder, get your questions in through YouTube, through Twitter, and we'll address them towards the end of the show. But moving swiftly on here with the second segment of the podcast, the Bengals at the Jets in week 3. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we flatter to deceive. The Bengals haven't been very flattering so far, Colin. But the Jets, unbelievably last week in the second half, were, or last 2 minutes were. How do you feel that this one's going to break down?
Yeah, I saw a tweet during the week, and it was kind of quoting, I suppose, La'el Collins when he signed for the Bengals, and he said to Joe Burrow, "Don't worry, your new bodyguard's in town. Nobody's going to touch you." And this quote tweet said, "Joe Burrow, JFK, having bodyguards let you down in Dallas," which was quite apt. Now, I would go back and say some of the sacks that Burrow is taking are on him, and he talked about that during the offseason. We've mentioned that before. He wants to hold on to the ball and make a play happen, but he cannot take the punishment that he has. Certainly all doesn't seem well in the Bengals camp. We saw, Joe Burrow shouting at his head coach last week. And prior to, obviously, look, this time last year, say at the start of last season, there was a lot of talk around the head coach of the Bengals, and then they went on the magical run. And obviously this season has not started well. They are looking to avoid going to 0-3, and if that were to happen, they would be the first team since the Rams at 0-2 to lose the Super Bowl and then go 0-3. The Jets are looking to go above 500 for the first time since week 1 of 2018. When they won their opener. So truly, Jets fans are long suffering. I honestly would not be at all surprised if the Jets were to win this one, because I do think that the Bengals are struggling, and I do think it's going to. They probably, I don't know, can they get it sorted out quick enough? They seem to be, getting in their own way. The passing game and the run game seem completely at odds with one another. That line looks a mess. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I picked the Bengals to win the North during our season preview show. And for that reason, and purely on the basis of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and the talent that they have, I'm going to believe in them. But if they go to 0-3, they'll have put themselves in an enormous hole.
There's an old line in the NFL for years which says bad lines don't travel. But this bad line did travel last year. It traveled all the way to LA for the Super Bowl like ourselves. But we're seeing it's catching up again already this season. Yeah, Colum's right. They said it correct. And it wasn't just Collins. I mean, they brought in two other experienced players and free agents that hadn't had great experience. One with the Patriots, one with the Bucs, Super Bowl rings. They thought it was all locked up and all sorts straight away, but it hasn't come to pass so far anyway. But I think Zach Taylor has to put his hands up here. There's a lot of things going wrong. His play calling is wrong. His management of the play clock is wrong. He's not using Mixon efficiently. The running back is arguably one of the best in the league. We don't see him in on the right plays. He never seems to be in on a third down with short yards, which is strange. They gave last week 184 yards, in which the Jets gave up against the run to the Browns. They should be leaning on Mixon this week, going back to basics and trying to get the win and then move on and start focusing on the rest of the season. But the Jets, for me, there's something good and positive going on with the Jets. We spoke in the offseason. I felt they were going in the right direction. Salah seems to have, Mark, you touched on last week. You could see how much we spoke about Dable with the Giants. You see the same with the Jets, the players. They all wanted to rally around the coach when they won the game. They're all very excited and delighted for him that he won the game, having had a difficult week with the New York media. The defensively, last week wasn't great, but they did hold the Ravens for 3.5 quarters in the first game. And, bearing in mind they were on the field for so long, the offense didn't do a lot for the Jets on that day. But Jets offensively last week got it going. Garrett Wilson looks like the player in which everybody thought he was. Coming out of the draft, Breece Hall, the second-round pick, had a great game last week. Touchdown. Carter stepped up from where he was last year. More. They've got some players. And Flacco, when he has the players around him, looks capable. Offensive line was a bit better last week. I'm going with the shock. I'm siding with the Jets here. I think the Jets are going to find a way to win again.
It's catching. It's the first of all infected Colin. Now it's infecting Brian. The shock therapy is coursing through the Irish NFL show tonight. Look, the Bengals are facing a backup quarterback. That's lovely. Didn't do much use last week. They faced a backup quarterback there and promptly lost to the Cowboys in Dallas. I did see a great tweet, which was, just imagine if they hadn't replaced 60% of the line, just imagine how many sacks Joe Burrow would be getting, which was somewhat ironic. But like Colin said, a lot of that isn't just on the line. It's also on Joe Burrow, who's holding onto the ball too long and setting himself up for that punishment. Sometimes you have to, throw the ball away and live to fight another down, perhaps. The reality is, if the Bengals go 0-3, they don't just set the stat, as Colin alluded to, about being the first team that went to the Super Bowl since the 2002 Rams to do that in the following season. They would also be 0-3 for the first time for them since 2019, when they started the season 0-11. I don't see that pattern emerging necessarily. I get all of Brian's points and agree, and I think this is going to be very close. But the one factor is I still think that Bengals defense has a roar in it. Yes, they have not had the greatest of starts to the season, but I think they're going to have more than enough for Joe Flacco. I think the defense can carry them this week, even if the offense and that line in particular still sputters. Don't worry, Brian, maybe one time on 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, that little sneak to Perrine instead of Mixon is going to work for Zach Taylor. We can but hope at some point along the way it will come to fruition. But roaring back into contention, I think the Bengals will make a reappearance in the matter and the very competitive matter of the AFC North. But don't forget, they did lose to the Jets last year. They actually lost in East Rutherford last year. So Brian's selection is It's out there. It's a lone wolf pick, Brian, because Michael's also going with the Bengals. But we'll see how it all transpires for you. We'll see how it all transpires shortly. Let's go to another two teams who have certainly underperformed to date against expectations, and indeed, in one instance, in an explosive fashion. A very big, even this early in the season, game, considering the aspirations of both these teams, and especially given the competitive division in the AFC West that the Raiders play in. The Raiders at the Titans, Colin. Break it down for us.
Yeah, definitely two sides who had much higher aspirations than where they are. And at the end of this game, the likelihood is, barring a tie, one of these teams is going to be 0-3. And you imagine that it not impossible, but very difficult to get a playoff spot from there. The Titans, we all probably predicted that they would take a step back. Given that they were kind of trading AJ Brown. I think they themselves probably expected that to an extent. I think if they felt that they had a real chance at it, I don't think they'd have traded AJ Brown. Right? You would keep your best players if you really felt that you had a proper tilt at a Super Bowl. Now that said, they did obviously draft rookie talent, but it just hasn't worked, and the injuries keep piling up there. Lost a couple of really important players in terms of their left tackle, and Dupree on the edge. So it's difficult. I don't know for them whether the fact that Tannehill possibly knows it's his last season, is that playing into it? And I really like Vrabel as a coach, and I think they will continue to play hard for him. For the Raiders, if they go to 0-3 for Josh McDaniels, there will be serious questions, I think, at that point. Not that like anything is going to happen, but people will begin to really look at this team who were very hyped prior to the season and the weapons that they have, and say, what is going on there? I do feel that given the injuries the Titans have, and given where the Raiders expected to be, I think the Raiders need this more than the Titans. The Titans, it feels to me, are kind of in not quite a rebuild, but at the same time, they're trying to figure out what Derrick Henry is. They've got a lot of contracts up at the end of the year. For the Raiders, that Derek Carr extension, they have a get a jail free card, but they have incredible pass catchers, and I think that they should be able to do enough to beat a depleted Titans side and to move to 1-2.
Yeah, this game has me torn all week. It has me torn all week that the graphic in which it's about to appear is now the one in which I am picking, but I had asked Michael to change it, and I had even contacted Hoagie Bear to have the graphic change on our weekly picks that goes out on a Sunday. However, Colin talks about the injuries in which the Titans have, and that's why I was siding with the Raiders. But in the last hour or so, it's been confirmed that Josh Jacobs is now out and Hunter Renfrow is now out. So to me, that's a big game changer in the game. I'm not sure if you knew that, Colin. So sorry if you hadn't read that. The Raiders, for me, need to put 4 quarters together. The first week, they didn't do anything until the third quarter. They came out fast in the second half against the Chargers. Adams had the big run, and then he got the touchdown. And then last week, they were very good in the first half, and then completely disappeared in the second half. They got to put it together for 4 quarters. The Titans, offensively line, they're struggling. Henry, we haven't seen a lot of Henry. The first week he was held 82 yards. He had a quite enough game in Buffalo last weekend, and their wide receivers are a bit unknown. I mean, they brought in Woods, hasn't done a lot. Brooks, there was a lot of expected of him. We did raise our concerns about letting AJ Brown go and expecting him to come in and take over the mantle and be efficient from day one. That can happen for a rookie, but sometimes, by and large, it takes a while to get going. I'm going to go with the Titans. I feel Derrick Henry will have a game on Sunday. I think we'll see Ryan Tannehill with his legs more so than his arm be a bit more efficient in terms of the run-pass option. Yeah, the Raiders have got explosive players, but Titans have a knack, and Vrabel in particular, of finding a win when they really need it. So I'll side with the Titans.
I don't know why, Brian, but when you said we're going to see Tannehill with his legs, and just at that point I had a vision of him doing river dance. Don't quite know why, but yes, he can be
He's
an
very mobile when he gets
interesting
going,
threat.
Mark.
He
He's
is.
very
No, I was
mobile.
going to say
Yeah.
he can be a threat, and you certainly see that around the goal line sometimes when he keeps on quarterback keeps when everyone thinks it's going to Derrick Henry, and scored a fair few touchdowns, rushing touchdowns in the last while. I, guys, this one is close. They're both 0-2. They're both, I mean, I won't say desperate, but yeah, desperate basically for a victory at this stage. The injuries to the Titans are severe. My biggest concern would actually be Taylor Lewan being missing. When you consider Chandler Jones, the last time he played the Titans was as an Arizona Cardinal. And what did he do in that game? Oh, that's right. He only got 5 sacks and 2 fumbles on his way to another Pro Bowl season. So he will be licking his lips at this opportunity. And whilst, yes, there are a few injuries on the Raiders' side, Brian, I think that they've still looked impressive enough in moving the ball at times, and I'm not sure the Titans have bottomed out yet. I thought they would take a step back this season. I thought they would take a significant step back. So far, I've been proved, sadly, I don't like to be right on that, but I have been proved right in that regard. And I just wonder whether or not this is a little bit of a spiral until they reset. They reset a little bit more. We've talked many moons about Tannehill's ability with his arm and whether it holds them back. They obviously don't have the downfield threats, even though they were pinning a lot of hopes on their rookie wide receiver this year. So injuries and all, I'm going to go with the Raiders to start to right the ship because, frankly, if they don't, they're out of it. If they go 0-3 with the AFC West and all those divisional games to come, they're gone, frankly. So the Raiders need it. They both need it, but I'll go Raiders. Michael's gone Titans. So we got a pure 50-50 split this weekend, which shows you how tight the game is, I suppose. Now, we'll round out this segment with the last of the 6 p.m. games this weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles, so impressive against the Minnesota Vikings and soaring in the sky, are going to face off in one of those unpredictable, undeniably complex to try to navigate NFC East divisional games against the complex and undeniably opaque Washington Commanders. Colin, who are you got in this one and why?
Well, this is obviously Brian's favorite of the 6 p.m. suite of games with these two teams going up against one another. The Commanders have probably been a little bit friskier on offense than any of us anticipated. When you consider McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson have, I think all of them are almost or at least 100 yards receiving, and they've combined for 6 touchdown catches. They had 10 touchdown catches for their receivers in all of last year. So they're definitely off to a decent start. But they are coming up against an Eagles side who have started the season on fire. Jalen Hurts completed 84% of his passes, and he was passing into the middle of the field against the Minnesota Vikings, which was the biggest knock against him coming into this season. But in terms of bringing in A.J. Brown, giving him a target there, and he has risen to the challenge thus far. They are going up against a Commanders team who still have issues on defense. And they rank dead last in the NFL in terms of yards allowed per rush. When you are going up against this Eagles side, and I think about this Eagles side, it's running back by committee. But when they're behind that line, it doesn't seem to matter. I believe that fact, the fact that they should be able to run on the Commanders, coupled with the shots that Hurts is likely to take, should lead the Eagles to win it. But it's a divisional game. It will be close. I've no doubt that we will see Carson Wentz want to prove a point and show that the Eagles, what he can do. I saw him come out this week and admit he could have been both a better person and better teammate. So perhaps he is learning. But I think this Eagles side have enough to get the win.
These two games were quite tight last year. I know it's a different season, but I do reflect on those games. Like NFC East games are always quite close. And like the Eagles had a red zone stand at the end to deny Washington the opening game in Washington, and then the other game was played later on in the season. It was a COVID game. It was played. The game got moved back, and for 3 quarters, Washington were well in the game. The Eagles pulled away. They always play each other close. Yeah, I can understand Colin's concerns around the Washington defense, but they are getting 2 safeties back this weekend, the strong safety and the free safety, which I imagine will help in terms of trying to stop the run game. And they do tend to have better games against Hurts. I don't know, it's down to the fact that 3 of the defensive line in the front 7 played in Alabama and played on the same team as Hurts. Maybe they know the good and the bad of what that player entails. And then you look on the other side, Washington's offense this season, 2nd best passing offense in the league, 2nd best quarterback rating in the league in Carson Wentz, 7 touchdowns, over 660 yards, going against a defense that played well on Monday night. But I'm still concerned, and I saw what Detroit were able to do to them in week 1. Dotson has 3 touchdowns already at 99 yards. He's going to go up against Maddox in this game. Maddox had a terrible game week 1, kind of rebounded last week. So if you're going to keep him off, the 2 main guys in Slay and Bradbury, and then even that they're going to have to manage Curtis Samuel, McLaurin. I think Washington have all the weapons. They're at home. They won their first game. They put up 28 points. They put up 27 last week. They can live with them. The Eagles haven't scored in the 4th quarter of either game because they've been easing off. I think they're going to be in a game right into the 4th quarter on Sunday. And I'm going with the upset. I'm going with the Commanders.
I mean, White Fang comes to mind. Hilary Mantel wrote Wolf Hall. I mean, the Wolves, the Lone Wolves, are circling all week in this regard. I'm going to weigh up, Brian, how many times you pick the Eagles all season, if truth be told. But look, you are right, and I said at the start, NFC East games are always very tight. This is actually the first NFC divisional game, divisional rivalry game of the season. The next one comes up on Monday Night Football, and the Cowboys go up against the Giants. So interest obviously lies ahead of seeing how these divisional rivals match up. And Colin, you call out, Brian, did you call out about Alabama? And Allen and trying to remember the other, Allen and Payne. That's it. Yeah. Allen and Payne used to play in Alabama. I saw them during the week, and they were talking about the fact, or Payne was talking about the fact that Nick Saban used to shout at them all the time about containing Hurts and about making sure to keep contained. You don't want Nick Saban on your case in relation to that. And for all that's been said about Hurts, and I've said a few things myself about my belief in his ability to get the ball down the field. He has gone through a lot as a player already. When you think back to his times in Alabama, you think back even to his start in the Eagles, and it's not the easiest crowd or set of fans to win over. He is certainly playing through adversity generally. What mustn't be overlooked is this Eagles offense is pretty damn explosive. They're up there. They get chunk plays all the time. They're racking off big runs. They're racking off good, solid completions down the field. And that is something that we have not seen from the Commanders. It's something we haven't seen from Carson Wentz, in fairness, since about 2016, 2017, generally. Overall, when I compare the 2 quarterbacks, when I compare what the Eagles' running game is doing, and most importantly, and Colin, you dealt on this really well, what the defense is capable of. I honestly, even though I believe it should be close as a divisional game, I don't see it being that close. And I feel that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to run, and then run away with the game. So I go for the Eagles to take this game. And Michael also agrees. So like I said, Brian continues on a Wolfie trip. Look, that's going to wrap up this part of the podcast, and we'll go on to the next segment where we'll wrap up a few more of the games moving into the late window. So starting off our late window games, let's kick off, guys, first of all, with the Jacksonville Jaguars at the LA Chargers. Colin, who you got on this one?
Well, this is, if we had probably picked this game 2 or 3 weeks ago before the season started, I think it would have, for me, it would have been probably very straightforward at that point. But I think the Jags are ahead of schedule in terms of where I thought they'd be. Now, some of that is, I think, a testament to just how bad things were under Urban Meyer last year. So they were always going to take a step forward when that circus had left town. But I do think that the players have also responded to Doug Peterson, and he has made positive impacts there. The defense is playing really well, and what they are doing in terms of their ability to get to the opposing quarterbacks is impressive. We talked about it on Monday night in terms of Christian Kirk and the way in which they're using him in interesting ways. You pay somebody that much money, you want them to kind of be the focal point, but he is, I suppose, kind of open things up for Trevor Lawrence. They still have a ways to go. They're by no means where they, I think, would like to be, but they're certainly moving in the right direction. This Chargers team, so much talent, but they now have really serious injury concerns. J.C. Jackson and Corey Linsley are both doubtful, and Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert are questionable. Apparently, Herbert is going to be a game time decision. Even if he plays, like how much pain is he going to be in? And I have no doubt that Jacksonville front is going to look to make him uncomfortable. And a rib injury, you can take the pain injection, but every time, no matter what you do, every time you throw that ball, every time you tuck it, every time you take a QB hit or a sack, it is going to impact on it. The Chargers, I think, still need to figure things out a little bit on offense. And for the reason that I don't know if Herbert is going to play, I am going to go and say that there is going to be an upset and that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win this one.
It is a difficult one to call because we just don't know how the cards are stacked for Sunday. It does look like Herbert Moore, as the week's gone on, is going to play. They were showing a lot of footage on NFL.com yesterday evening of him practicing with the guys. There is some bright spots for this Chargers offense this season. Garrett, the tight end, looks really good. He had a good game last week before he had the win taken out, and he wanted to go off the field before that pick six. And then Palmer, the wide receiver last year, second year in the league, he's starting to step up. Had a touchdown last week, some nice plays. If the offense is there, Keenan Allen, for me, like, he's getting to a stage of his career where he's out, but I don't think he's a big loss. We have to see Williams have a strong game as he did last week. But again, it's all down to how Herbert is. They're going to have to rely on the running game. It is a running game by committee. They've got two new running backs from the draft, and then doing guy last year, Kelly, on the back of Eckler. So you'd imagine they'll try their utmost to get the run game going. Jags offense, very good week one, very good week two. It's week one they really should have won in Washington. They had a number of red zone opportunities and ended up relying on field goals and then some fourth downs. But I can't go against the Chargers. On the assumption that Herbert is going to play, even with the difficulty of the injury, I think they'll have enough. It'll be a lot closer than people would have expected, like you said, Colin. But Chargers need to win competitive division. You talked about the Raiders going 0-3. If the Chargers go 1-2, and the Chiefs win as many people expect and go 3-0, it's a massive gap already. Bearing in mind they've already lost the Chiefs, essentially they'll be 3 games behind them. So they have to win this game, and I believe they will.
Jesus, guys. Colin, I'm still in shock. I mean, like, did you just agree every pick we're going to have one person going rogue in relation to it? It's certainly good fun tonight. The reality for me, Brian, is if those Chargers have to rely upon their run game, well, they're a bit screwed then, because their run game's been pathetic this year. They're averaging 2.7 yards a carry. They've gone negative yards or no gain on 15 of their 55 rushing yards. I mentioned about a minute ago about how the Eagles get chunk plays and have been getting chunk plays in the run game and the pass game. Do you know how many rushes the Chargers have? Yes, it's only 2 weeks, but how many rushes, even on 55 attempts, have gone for more than 10 yards?
I'd say 5 or 6 max.
Uno solamente. Just the one. And
so get a count at some stage, Mark.
They do. Well, again, if Justin Herbert doesn't play and they're relying upon Chase Daniel, the career backup, to step into the play. I mean, his career backup of 13 years in the NFL. It's the dream job, isn't it, guys? You never have to play and you get all these lovely paychecks along the way. If they have to rely upon that, they will need to get it going. But the Jacksonville Jaguars defense has been quite stout and has certainly been appearing. And Trevor Lawrence, I mean, really, I want to see Justin Herbert play because I want Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence to have a proper who has the best hair. It's a hair off, basically, between them, between the locks they both show. But last week we talked about the Indianapolis Colts not being able to break the curse of Jacksonville, and they went to 0-8. Tell you someone who has a worse record than that, the Jacksonville Jaguars, because it's not just one team or one location. They can't win when they get out of Florida. 0-18 consecutive road losses. And in that time as well, they've never beaten the Chargers, I don't think, either. I think they were 0-5 against the Chargers in the times that they have matched up. There's a curse for you. The Road Warriors won't be able to road it up because they've never been able to road it up. Trevor Lawrence's education continues. And even with Justin Herbert maybe hobbling in, maybe not able to play, I'll still feel and believe the Chargers will have just enough to see them off. Michael concurs. Colin, you're lone wolf in it yet again. We'll see if this pack mentality around the wolf piece continues on when we go to our next game, which is the Los Angeles Rams. Okay, keeping it with the LA guys. Go from the Chargers to the Rams. Los Angeles Rams at the Arizona Cardinals. The Rams didn't start week one very well, Colin, but the Cardinals haven't started week one well or week two well generally, but they finished with a bit of a bang. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, they absolutely did, and it was kind of Kyler Murray magic that led to that win last week. As much, it almost felt like Cliff Kingsbury was doing a John Terry with the celebrations, and when it was all Kyler Murray that made it happen, and that's what I think the Cards are reliant on, given that Hopkins is out. The unfortunate thing for them is that they are playing against the Rams, and the Rams are not the force that they were last year. There are issues. You lose somebody like Whitworth, and I thought that bringing in Bobby Wagner would help on the leadership side of things, but Whitworth's influence on the line has certainly been missed. Worried still about Stafford's arm and what that might mean. So I do think there are questions. But Aaron Donald loves playing against Kyler Murray. He seems to just decide that he wants to wreck the game. And he's been pretty dismissive of him in the media. But Kyler, needs to, I suppose, have a performance to where he can shut Aaron Donald up. It hasn't really happened as yet. I think whenever Kyler's come up against the Rams, it's tended to be a bit of a slog. And for that reason, I'm going to go with the Rams, though. As I said, I still think that they are figuring things out. So I don't expect, I think this will be a close game. It's not like I expect the Rams to run away with it. Because of the Aaron Donald factor, I'm going with the Rams.
I mean, the Stafford narrative still keeps continuing even after week two, that his arm is struggling, but he did look a lot better last week. I know, albeit people say it was against the Falcons team, but a lot more efficient. Players got open a lot quicker in the game compared to when they played that Bills defense in week one. He was in the red zone 5 times. He took 4 touchdowns out of that, so he was a lot better last week. They had a 25-point lead going into the fourth quarter, eroded to what looked like a kind of a scary opportunity to actually lose the game to the Falcons in the end. So I think they were a lot more comfortable than the score was reflected in the end. 17 garbage points, I suppose we could call it. The Cards secondary statistically is the worst in the league, despite the comeback last week. And despite not giving up many yards in the second half. So it just goes to show how bad they were in week one, how bad they were in the first half of last week's game. And they're going up against the Lights Cup, and Allen Robinson, Colm's favourite friend, had a breakout game last week for the Rams, and I imagine he will be looking to get in there and have a really good, strong game again. And I just can't see how the Cards will keep up with them. I think the Rams will find a way to win this game. I think this one is one of the most comfortable games of the weekend for me. I think the Rams will win, easing off into the fourth quarter.
Well, the Rams are on a bit of a tear against the Cards. I think going back to 2017, they've won 10 of 11 games against the Cardinals. We often talk about some of these divisional rivalries, how one team just randomly has the number of the other at various stages during that rivalry, even if they're not performing. Cough, see Jacksonville Jaguars versus Indianapolis Colts last week. But the Rams have been a class act for the last number of years. Cooper Kupp continues on his tear. 8 games in a row, he's had a receiving touchdown. And whilst the Cards have J.J. Watt being effective when he's on the field, he was on for a fair bit against the Raiders last week. He seems healthy and will play this week, which is a good sign. They cannot have a sustainable game plan which involves doing middling to nothing for 3/4 of the game and then just relying upon Kyler Murray to produce some spectacular magic at the end. I think the interesting thing for me is, and I didn't look into this, but this is the 4th time these teams have played during the calendar year with just the way the whole schedule has worked. So that's an intriguing little nugget for you as well, with the playoff game they play between themselves as well. Given the whole strength of the roster overall, I must discount some amazing Kyler magic sprinkling its magic dust for a second week in a row and go with the logic, the sense, the offense and the defense, which has been more consistent. So I am going with the Los Angeles Rams to win this game. Michael, too, in relation to this, once column appears on the screen, the picks. There we go. Michael, in this instance, wanted to be the lone wolf, and he has gone from the Arizona Cards to peck away at those Rams and win the day. I mean, I think there's been one game 4 of us have agreed on so far, which was Baltimore at Patriots, but I'm sure there'll be others along the way. I'm sure there'll be others that we will agree with. Right, before we wrap up this section, we'll do one more quick game here. The Falcons at the Seahawks. So let's deal with some more birds of prey along the way. We have the Cards. We've had the Eagles previously, but the Falcons at the Seahawks. Colin, not much to be said about these teams in some respects, but break down this game for us and how maybe 2, let's say, middling teams, I'll be polite, middling teams might perform and how it will play out.
Yeah, 2 teams, both of whom will probably have different quarterbacks next year. The Seahawks are struggling offensively, which I don't think is going to be a surprise to anyone. That was the expectation prior to the season. They put a lot into getting the win over the Broncos, and deservedly so. But since in the past 6 quarters, they're scoreless. And that's got to be an enormous worry, to go 6 quarters without scoring a point. And that's not all on Geno. They also haven't scored, much like the Broncos. They haven't scored from the red zone this season. And they're going up against a Falcons side who are capable of scoring points, but are also capable of giving up an enormous number of points. There was talk during the week, and rightly so, around Arthur Smith and the fact that he kind of unlocked Cordarrelle Patterson, but he doesn't seem to know what to do with his unicorn of a tight end in Kyle Pitts. And again, he got a little bit tetchy, probably even more tetchy than Mike Tomlin when asked about Trubisky last night, when people kind of pointed it out to him. And he said, "I'm not here to play fantasy football. I'm here to win games." It's like, well, then you need to win games, Arthur. So this is one probably where the strength of the Falcons is offense, the strength of the Seahawks is defense. It's a little almost a bit of a coin flip, I think, in ways. But I think the way in which the NFL is in 2022, you're better off almost having a more powerful offense rather than a defense. And for that reason, I'm going to say that Arthur Smith is not playing fantasy football, but he is winning games this week. The Falcons to get the victory.
Colin said it's a coin flip game. It's not a coin flip game in my opinion, because I called it on Monday. I made my pick on Monday's show. I said Seattle are going to rebound and be 2-1 come the end of this weekend. Yeah, the Falcons offense has played reasonably well, I would say. You know, week 1 they played well against the Saints, and then Dean Pease, who said this defense is going to be the best in the league, somehow self-destructed in the fourth quarter, allowed a miraculous Saints comeback where they were down by 16 points at one stage. And last week, okay, fairness against the Super Bowl champions, they gave up quite a. It wasn't even about the scores; it was about the yards they gave. It was, it was quite high as well. And Seattle didn't do anything last week. Pete Carroll has a knack of, as we said before, finding ways to get performance out players that are below their or above their pay grade, shall we say, in terms of defensively performing. They did it in week 1 against the Broncos. Obviously, everybody was revved up with the Russell Wilson factor. But I think at home, 12th man, Falcons will find a way to self-destruct, and Seattle will lap it up. And Geno Smith, I actually think, will have a rebound game because he still has good players. Penny, the running back, is underrated in my opinion. I think he's quite a good player. Bearing in mind that they've had to let their main running back from last year, Carlson, is retired because of injury. He stepped up last year towards the back end of the season, started well in the opening game. They've still got Lockett, they've still got Metcalf, they've got 2 young tight ends, and obviously the one they brought in with Noah Fant. I think they still have players there offensively to do damage on this Falcons defense, which I think is quite weak. So for me, Seattle win this game comfortably.
Comfortably. Well, from a man who predicted the Hawks will win 10 games, I'm not surprised to hear Brian is leaning in favour. 9. I'm sorry. 9.
You and Michael seem to continue to tag on the extra game. That's fine. So when we hit the end of the season and they win 9, you go, oh, but you said 10.
At that stage, Brian, I'll be saying you said 11. Don't worry. I'll be adding on a couple more at that stage. Look, it's interesting. The Clash had a song, London Calling. London is definitely calling next week, obviously, but nowhere is London calling more than when Marcus Mariota throws the ball, because he sends a lot of them in the direction of Drake London, the number 8 overall pick in last year's draft, or this year's draft, sorry, I should say. The Falcons have been playing tough. They've had 2 close losses, and the Rams, as you alluded to, Colin, obviously they came back very strongly in, and were maybe unfortunate not to really cause a sensational upset towards the end. But I would say that was a little bit more of a factor of the Rams letting them back in the game rather than the Falcons necessarily forcing their way back in. The Seattle Seahawks, I was criticizing the run game of the Chargers a minute ago. They have been abysmal running the football. I mean, 56 yards they're averaging. It's really bad, frankly. However, even though they're that bad, even though Marcus Mariota has not started the season too badly, and he has that wonderful connection of Drake London, I think it's at Lumen Field. I think it's the 12th man. I think Seattle raised their game not only for the season opener and because it was against Russell Wilson, but because they were at home. So with that surprising situation, I'm going to go with the Seattle Seahawks also to win this game. So we'll just flip up the picks there quickly. That's Brian and Mark have gone for the Seattle Seahawks. Colin and Michael have gone for the Atlanta Falcons. And like I say, maybe Drake London wins, scores a touchdown, but definitely London's calling next week. I won't be there, unfortunately. I'm in the United States, but Colin, Brian, and Michael will be doing live shows there outside the stadium again in the morning, and then obviously covering the game live, the NFL show, Irish NFL show, all the way through the game. Look, guys, that brings us to the end of this particular segment with a couple of key games to wrap up in the last piece, and then we'll be taking your questions and answers. Okay, so let's get on. There'll be 2 cracking games to wrap up towards the end of this segment, towards the end of this show tonight. First of all, I think the Bills and the Dolphins is the game of the week, to be honest, gents. But many people have said, well, no, the game of the week might be in the NFC to see one last time. One last time. Do you know when they're 60, they'll still be saying one last time for Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady to face off against each other. But it's not really about them. It's probably about the two defenses. But what do you think about it, Colin?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Who would have thought that, you're talking about Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady, and I think realistically it is going to be the defenses who decide this game. The Packers defense has probably been a little bit disappointing in terms of certainly what I expected of them going into the season, and the Bucs defense on the other hand proved itself in New Orleans. That was the reason they ultimately got the win. The Bucs, I feel, they will do truly whatever it takes to win. Like, without that fight last week, I think the Saints potentially win that game, but the fight completely knocked the Saints out of their rhythm. They seemed to lose their heads, and the Bucs got the win. It cost the Bucs Mike Evans, who usually actually plays quite well against the Packers. So that is a sizable loss for them. And also the Bucs have struggled on the ground. Their run game has not gotten going thus far. I think they really miss Chris Godwin in the slot, and the fact that they're bringing in Cole Beasley to play there, I don't understand that, because they're such different players. Like, Godwin offers you in terms of blocking, in terms of downfield. Beasley does none of that. So I'm intrigued to see how that works out. And for the Packers, it is, can they get to a point where Aaron Rodgers is happy with his wide receivers? How long do they have to lean into Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon? In ways, I suppose, the Packers are at home, Bucs are at home, but the Packers have probably the stronger roster. But I've said it a million times: you cannot bet against Tom Brady. It's Tom Brady's universe, and for that reason, I'm going with the Bucs.
When the schedule came out and we did our schedule release show at, I think it was 7 o'clock in the morning, Colin, if you recall, we jumped on live and went through the schedule, and we didn't really have much time to kind of really get our heads around the schedule because it came out throughout the night. This is the one game we actually did discuss in detail on that show, which how attractive, what a mouth-watering game it is. Week 3, no adverse weather conditions in Florida where there's potential thunderstorms and rain, and this is the game. Nice weather, perfect game. We'll see the last game between these two guys. It's going to be fantastic. Both offenses will be firing. Both quarterbacks have a rating of below 100 at this stage of the season after 2 weeks. I know it's 2 weeks, but who would have thought it? You say it's about defenses. It's more, for me, it's about which offense gets the most of the wide receivers, and you touched on it there. The Bucs have got injuries on wide receiver. Who is Brady going to trust the weekend? Does Rodgers trust any of them? He probably trusts Cobb, but he needs to start trusting the other guys, and ultimately he needs to get more out of them. I think the Pack have the better run game. If it comes down to who's going to win because of the run, I think it will be the Packers. Will they lean? I think this is a game where Rodgers will try his utmost to get these wide receivers in check. In the game more so than the Bucs. I see it a struggle for both sides, but inevitably I think Rodgers has more weapons to win this game, and for that reason, the Bucs haven't been 3-0 in 17 years, and I don't think it's going to happen this weekend. So I'm siding with the Packers in this game.
The wide receiver depth has to be a concern for the Bucs, as at the time of recording, Godwin and Jones are questionable. We don't know if either are going to play. We do know that Mike Evans is not going to play. Brady is already down, obviously Gronk, so he's got Cameron Brate maybe for a couple of throws, but his tight end department is far weaker than it was. I disagree, Colin, that the Bucs run game hasn't been completely effective. I think Lenny Fournette's is 5th in the league in rushing yards, but I agree that he's got a lot of attempts to get there. It hasn't really broken open a big one, and they've had to plow away at it. Certainly the offense overall has been quiet, I think is polite. I mean, they're averaging 19.5 points per game with two pretty damn scrappy games against the Cowboys and the Saints. The reality is, though, this could be a great defensive matchup. I reckon that the Bucs run defense against the Packers rush offense, particularly AJ Dillon, is going to be the deciding factor in this particular game. If that rush defense holds up, then the Bucs probably will win. If it doesn't, then the Packers will win. That, to me, is the critical matchup in the entire game, if I'm being brutally honest in relation to it. Yes, it is the Aaron and Tom show. Yes, they do not have the same threats. They have not performed so far in the season, but it's only week 2 as well. But I can't see this being a massive breakout game. It's going to be a defensive arm wrestle. And when it's a defensive arm wrestle, it's Tom Brady's universe. But when it's not a defensive arm wrestle, it's Tom Brady's universe. This instance, remember last year, the Bucs won with their defense taking the ball away from Aaron Rodgers a couple of times. Somehow, some way, the Bucs defense will just top the Green Bay defense, which is a serious unit in relation to it. And they will find a way to keep the pressure on. And I have gone for the Bucs to win. And Colin's shaking his head, which means the wrong graphic's going to appear. But I can promise you, I picked the Bucs, and I've got the evidence here to say it. So I picked the Bucs, which I'll make sure is the pick. Colin has the Bucs as well, and Brian and Michael have gone for the Packers. So we're split evenly in relation to it. I'll send on the message. Definitely picked them. Okay, before we get on to our last game, I just want to do a call out. One of our key partners this year is PointsBet. They're a leading US sports betting provider, and we're partnering with them for the 22-23 season. Now, you might think, you're going to get bombarded with a lot of free bets to sign up and things. Well, you're not. They're a US betting provider. What they are in Ireland is actually a really exciting employer of tech talent here. They've got a great new office in Dublin's Liberties, and they're employing technology experts around the world. So if you've an interest in the NFL, an interest in engineering, an interest in working in aspects which drive in-play betting, for example, please look up their details. For example, on LinkedIn, search for PointsBet Dublin on LinkedIn, or email them at dublin@pointsbet.com. We're going to be excited to learn a little bit more about the technology and the maths behind how all these live betting odds work. And a few members of their team will join us through the season to explain how all the NFL betting really works, and especially give us some guides from time to time as to what's hot and what's not. Interesting stat for you, gents. The game that the line has moved on the most this entire week is actually the Jags and the Chargers game, purely because people are looking at the potential injury to Justin Herbert, ruling him out of the game. And so there's a lot of fluctuation there. Brian, you look like you want to add something. As soon as I mention betting, you're kind of like chomping at the bit. No?
Well, it was more so on the Packers game. And I suppose it is a betting angle. The over on the game is 41 points. I mean, bearing in mind these teams have been playing over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, it's usually around 49 to 50. That's how low it is now, 41 points. That's how, I suppose, committed the bookies are to seeing two defenses take hold of the game. One thing we haven't said about the Bucs offense, it's the storyline is about the injuries and the players that are out, but they have played against two strong defenses in Dallas and the Saints last week. You've got the wins, but they have gone up against two strong defenses. Mm-hmm. And that really hasn't played into the conversation, because it's more so about the lack of players in terms of what's available to them. But they have gone against two really strong defense, arguably two of the top 10 in the league.
Well, true, and they've got another one this week in going up against the Packers. And there are two strong defenses in the last game we're going to look at. This is the Sunday Night Football game this week. I know Colin Cronin is going to have opinions on this particular game. We're talking about the San Francisco 49ers, led now by Jimmy Garoppolo, going up against Russell Wilson's Broncos down there in Denver, Colorado. Colin, how do you see this breaking down?
Well, look, for the Broncos, this all comes down to, can they sort out the red zone issues? The Broncos are the only team since 2000 with 5 goal-to-go situations and 0 touchdowns in weeks 1 and 2. That is the key question, I suppose, and around kind of sorting out the penalties. The Broncos lead the league, so bottom of the league alongside the Seahawks in terms of touchdowns in the red zone, leading the league in penalties. Now, the 49ers gave away an inordinate amount of penalties in week 1 against the Bears, but they cleaned that up. Brian actually sent me on a piece during the week about rookie head coaches in particular calling plays, and how the statistics would tell you that is a really terrible idea because they have so much else to learn. And, you know, it's generally maybe as they get old, get a bit more experienced, that they can do it. There are some who do it and, you know, have always done it. But for Hackett at the moment, it looks like, you know, he's carrying a lot. He came out during the week, said he's going to continue to call plays, but that apparently he's had input from the GM and the assistant GM, and that's going to somehow help. I have some concerns around that as well. I mean, outside, the thing is, outside of getting into the red zone, the Broncos have actually moved the ball really well. We've gone from a team that like were the 3-and-out champs to a team that can actually move the ball really well. But there are significant injuries that the Broncos are dealing with. And I actually, you know, I think that in terms of the 49ers, they are probably, you know, they know what they have with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think in the regular season, Jimmy Garoppolo assists the 49ers. I will say that I saw a stat during the week that said Jimmy Garoppolo has appeared in 6 career playoff games with the Niners. In the fourth quarters of those games, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a passer rating of 28. That is horrific. And that is the reason that they wanted to move on from Jimmy. He's great in the regular season, but in crunch time against the elite defenses, that's where he has issues. The Broncos have been really good on defense, but the Broncos have also got up against the Seahawks and the Texans. This is going to be much more of a test. I don't think this will be a high-scoring game, but from what I understand, Kittle is going to be back for the 49ers, which I think makes a considerable difference from them. I think Hackett is still learning. I think the Broncos will eventually get things sorted out, but I think at that point it'll probably be too late for the AFC West. But Kyle Shanahan has Jimmy G in place. He's getting George Kittle back. I spoke in the season preview about the talent they have on the defensive side of the ball. I think this will be a low-scoring game, but I have the 49ers to win it.
Colin calls out that the Broncos defense has only gone up against Seattle and the Texans last week, and since the half-time in the Seattle game, they've certainly addressed things in terms of stopping Seattle. And with all due respect to how the Texans played last week, they put in a strong performance for the entirety of the game, and they were very committed to their coach, Lovie Smith, but they couldn't do a lot as the game progressed. I do buy into this Broncos defense. I do see the reasons why Jimmy G can be a concern. It's a Sunday night football game. Mile High will be, whatever he's called it these days, I continue to call it Mile High Stadium. There will be, you know, a rowdy crowd, a boisterous crowd. It's Sunday night football, and Jimmy G is prone to mistakes in these type of games. And Colin was alluded to the fact that the Broncos have been able to move the ball up and down the field, just can't punch it in. But at some stage, that has to stop. They need to find a way into the end zone. And I think it will be Sunday night. I think Russell Wilson will get them over the hump. I think this feels like they're in a state of flux because of the offense and the play calling. Colin touched on it. We had a good conversation this week. Similarities in a way, you know, 2 expansive offensive coordinators who've come from strong teams to manager, to head coach our teams. Giants guys made a decision to hand it off to a guy who was with the Chiefs and has worked under Andy Reid. I can understand that. Hackett probably feels at this stage he would be more comfortable calling the plays than handing it off to his offensive coordinator. That may change throughout the course of the season when he gets a bit more of a trust element. I don't like the the points column. Well, I don't like what we're in about GMs getting involved at this stage of the season. It's the third game of the season. We need to see how things transpire. But for me, as good as the 49ers are, I think the Broncos, they need this. They really need this win. For me, they find a way to get over the line on Sunday night.
49ers, still shaking off the bad vibes from a terrible week one loss to the Bears. The Broncos, Colin, would possibly contend equally shaking off the bad vibes from a terrible week one loss to the Seahawks necessarily. I think patience and calmness is needed in both these places. One, giving Jimmy some chance to reestablish himself and to calm down, but Broncos fans even more so, perhaps give Wilson and Hackett a little bit of room to breathe. Remember, the Peyton Manning era started off 2-3, and that didn't turn out too bad. So giving him a little bit more of a chance. And Russell Wilson won't mind facing off against the 49ers. He's 16-4 against them in his career, bearing in mind, obviously, he used to face them twice a year, every single year. The 49ers defense I think it's two good defenses, by the way. They're stingy. They haven't allowed a team over 100 rushing yards in 7 or 8 games. And given that I think at the moment the Broncos are still going to lean heavily on Williams and Melvin Ingram as their not
Melvin Gordon.
Melvin Gordon, that's it. Thank you. As their 1-2 punch at the rushing attack. That is potentially the pivot of their offense at the moment. Given that they're waiting for a little bit more dynamism out of the offense, Cortland Sutton, had an amazing game last week. Actually, I thought he was the difference, obviously, between a very embarrassing loss to the Texans and actually then pulling out that game. His connection with Wilson was something that gives you hope for the future there. But I feel that the 49ers are getting Kittle back. They've got Deebo Samuel. They have an impressive offensive line, a strong rushing attack, even though they've had their own injuries again to that running back position and therefore have lost some of their threats there. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be tense with two teams with a lot on the line. Neither of these teams obviously wants to slip to 1-2. Nobody wants to lose a game in the National Football League. But even if they did, it's not necessarily fatal to either of them. On balance, I'm leaning in favor of the 49ers and my friends in Santa Clara to continue to fight another day. And Michael also agrees. So the two Broncos fans are going with the 49ers. The Giants fan is going with the Broncos. And it truly is a week of lone wolves here on the Irish NFL show all together.
That's a bit of reverse psychology. They're praying for a Broncos win, but they're going to want to look right on Monday night should the Niners win.
Hey, I'm praying for a Patriots win. I still pick the Ravens. I mean, we're going with our heads, not our hearts, is what I will say.
Is that a bit of projection from last week there, Mr. O'Leary?
I'm glad you're saying that because I think he's nowhere I'm going to be going with Monday night's game.
As someone who's picked the Giants both weeks so far and predicted a 4-0, I think I picked him in week one, but 4-0 start.
No, you didn't.
No, okay. No, I predicted a 4-0 start though after week one, 4-0 start. Yeah. So I'm still on with you. Before we wrap up, we love all the interaction on Twitter, on YouTube, all the comments that have come in. So thanks everyone ever so much for those columns. A couple of questions maybe that have come in.
Yeah, just to echo what you said, Mark, I suppose just love seeing the interaction on the YouTube comments, on Twitter, and don't forget we are across social media and we do always enjoy interacting with people. If you do listen to the podcast, if you can review it, subscribe, it really helps us out. And yeah, one thing we want to do really this year is to look to bring in a couple of questions when we get the chance. So we did have a question around the AFC West and whether I suppose 2 weeks in, there was a lot of talk from March onwards that this would be the best division in football. And I will put this to the two of you, given that I am a fan of a team in the division. So I'll leave it just to the two of you, and this will round out the show. Is the AFC West still the best division in football, or the thoughts on that?
I thought you were going first, Mark.
Okay.
God,
I'll let you go first. But manners, Brian, I'll let you.
Sorry, Mark. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Really, I know it's 3 or 4 weeks ago before the season. We would have said it's a slam dunk. I still think it is. Yes, it is. I think it's too early for us to be saying it's not the case. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. The Chargers are coming off a difficult loss last week, but they really could have won that game in Arrowhead. And the narrative going into this game against the Jags this weekend would be very different. They're still a very strong side. You would expect them to be competing. And I still think there's too many games left to be writing off the Raiders and the Broncos. I mean, Colum's concerned about the Broncos this Sunday, and so is Mike, and rightly so, because they're playing against a very good NFC West team. But they still have a lot of players there, and you touched on something. I mean, he had a great game last week. There's a long way to go there. You look at who's coming out of playoffs. I mean, the Titans are struggling. The Colts are struggling. There's 2 great teams, I think, in the AFC East, which I called out at the start of the season. I felt that the Dolphins would run this Bills team close, but this division is still stacked, and I think it's a lot of these games are going to come down to margins in terms of close games, field goals here and there, and teams will take games off each other that we don't expect.
Statistically, there's 3 divisions in the NFC that have all their teams 500 or above. In the AFC, the only division that has that is actually the AFC East. Definitely wouldn't have predicted that at any point in the season. But overall, yes, it's still the best division in the football. The Chiefs have started like a rocket ship. The Chargers have shown their class that are still there. I do think the Broncos will get it together. It's just a slower build and burn. And the Raiders were shown in flashes, though, as we broke it down earlier on. If they go 0-3, there's a big spiral that they could go down, especially given all of those big money off-season moves they made. But I think they'll bounce back as well, and they'll right the ship, although maybe it won't be enough, obviously, to make the playoffs. Any one of them can beat any one of them. Any one of those teams in the AFC West, I would give them a great shot against any team in the NFL. And yes, as the questionnaire posed in relation to it, the Chiefs are still the daddy of that division, however, and still rocking it every night at the moment. Okay, that brings us to an end tonight. We will be back on Monday Night Football for our MNF. We'll give you a breakdown of the Sunday games and previewing an intriguing Monday Night Football game between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. We'll also be back later on next week, and we'll be doing all the build to the first London game of the season when the Irish NFL show will be back on tour with a live show there, and looking forward to all the fun and games that London has to bring. With that, I'm going to bid adieu to you, gentlemen. Good night to Colm and to Brian. Thanks, as always, to our sponsors, Cassidy Travel, our equipment providers, Trust, and everyone for all your continued support. Interact with us at the weekend. We're looking forward to the games. Tell us when we're wrong. Tell us when we're right occasionally as well. And take care and have a great weekend and enjoy the football.